Come on then, sugar, shake that umbrella off. Don't you dare track that mud on my clean floor. Bless your heart. Look at you, soaked to the bone, just like a drowned rat. Pull up that chair closer to the heater, Lord. It is coming down out there, ain't it? Sounds like 1,000 marbles spilling on a tin roof. I always did love the sound of rain on metal. Reminds me of when I was a little girl and the world wasn't moving so fast. Sit down. Now let me get you something warm. You look like you got the weight of the whole world on those shoulders. I know that look, honey. I invented that look 50 years ago here. Take this quilt. It was your great-grandma's. She stitched every square of that while waiting for news that never came. But that is a story for another time. Right now, I want you to look at this here on my lap. You see this ugly old rusted thing? Yeah, this Ritz cracker tin, the one with the corners all dented in and the paint peeling off looking like it. Survived the tornado. You probably walked past this box 100 times looking for Christmas decorations in the attic and never paid it no mind, just thought it was grandma's junk. Well, honey, this box has been the heaviest thing I ever carried, and I ain't talking about how much it weighs in your hands. I'm talking about the ghost living inside it. I reckon I don't have much time left. The way my bones are creaking this morning, sounding like a screen door in a hurricane. And before I go meet the good Lord, I gotta set something down. I gotta tell someone. And seeing as you are the only one who still comes to visit this old woman without checking your watch every 5 minutes, I guess you are the one who has to hear it. See, for 60 years, I kept this box hid under the floorboards and then later behind the winter coats in the cedar closet, because if your pawpaw had ever opened this lid, it would have broke his heart right in two, and I love that man. More than breath itself. But we all got secrets, sugar. Even old wrinkled ladies making biscuits. We got parts of our hearts we keep locked up tight. I want you to open it. Go ahead, the lid sticks a little. Yeah, just give it a good tug. There you go. Smells like dust and dried rose petals, don't it? See, that stack of papers tied up with the twine, that right there is why I sometimes wake up at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling, wondering if I did the right thing, wondering if life is about doing what you want or doing what you ought to do. But to tell you about those letters, I got to take you back a ways back before the internet and the cell phones and the sadness you see on the news every day. Back to when the roads around here were dirt, and the only thing we had plenty of was time I was born, right after the big war ended. 1947, Daddy came back from Europe with a limp in his left leg and a silence in his throat. That was wider than the Mississippi River. He was a good man, your great-granddaddy, but he left a piece of his soul over there in France. I reckon he worked the mill down by the river and Mama took in washing, and we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, but we didn't know we were poor, 'cause everyone else was broke too. We ate beans and cornbread 6 days a week, and if we were lucky, we had a chicken on Sunday after church, and let me tell you, that chicken tasted better than anything you can buy in the store today because it tasted like survival. You know, folks talk about the good old days like they were all sunshine and sweet tea, but honey, they forget the fear. Daddy used to wake up screaming in the middle of the night, thinking the Germans were coming through the window, and Mama would just hold him and hush him like a baby, rocking back and forth until the shaking stopped. I learned real early that love wasn't about flowers and candy. Love was about cleaning up the mess, and holding someone when they were broken. Love was quiet. Love was hard work. It was getting up at 4 in the morning to start the fire in the stove so the house would be warm when the babies woke up. I was a wild thing back then, running barefoot through the creek, catching crawdads with my hair in braids, looking like a mess. I didn't care about being a lady. I wanted to climb the oak trees and see how far I could look out past the horizon. I wanted to know what was beyond the county line, because back then the county line felt like the edge of the earth. We didn't have no television telling us what to think. We just had the radio and the preacher on Sunday morning telling us we were all sinners in the hands of an angry God. But I didn't feel like a sinner. I just felt hungry for life, hungry for something I couldn't name. It was Jimmy. Now, don't you look at me like that with your eyebrows raised. Yes, your grandma had a life before Papa, and his name was Jimmy McCullough. He lived 3 farms over down past where the old silo used to stand before the tornado took it in 74. Jimmy wasn't like the other boys around here. Most of them just wanted to grow up and work the mill or farm the land and do exactly what their daddies did. And there's nothing wrong with that, honey. That is honest work. But Jimmy, he had a fire in him. He had eyes that were blue as a summer sky. And when he looked at you, it felt like he was seeing right down to the bottom of your soul. We grew up together, scraping knees and stealing apples from old man Jenkins' orchard. But when we turned 16, something changed. It was like one day I looked at him and he wasn't just the boy who put a frog in my lunch pail. He was something else entirely. I remember the first time he held my, yet it was at the county fair under the fireworks. The air smelled like popcorn and diesel fuel from the tractors, and he reached out and took my hand, and my heart started beating so fast I thought it was going to punch a hole right through my ribs. He didn't say nothing. He just squeezed my fingers, and I knew right then and there that I was in trouble, deep trouble. We used to sneak out to the old water tower after my daddy fell asleep. Listening to the Opry on the radio, we would sit up there dangling our legs off the edge, looking at the lights of the town flickering like lightning bugs in a jar, talking about everything and nothing. Jimmy wanted to be a pilot. He wanted to fly jets. He said, May, I am going to get us out of here. I am going to take you to Paris, France, and we are going to eat on top of that big tower, and you are going to wear a silk dress, and nobody's ever going to look down on us again. He had such big dreams, Sugar, and he made me believe them. Made me believe that a dirt road girl could touch the stars. But life has a way of laughing at your plans, don't it? Just when you think you got the roadmap figured out, the good Lord unfolds a whole new landscape you ain't never seen before. 1965 rolled around, and the world started getting mean. The news from the television started showing jungles and helicopters and boys coming home in boxes draped in flags, but we thought we were safe here in our little bubble. We thought that war was something that happened to other people far away. People, I remember the day the letter came for Jimmy, not a love letter like the ones inside this tin box, but a letter from Uncle Sam telling him his number came up, telling him he had to go fight a war that nobody understood. We were sitting on the tailgate of his daddy's pickup truck watching the sun go down over the cornfields, turning everything gold and purple, and he held that paper in his hands, and his knuckles were white. He didn't cry, Jimmy never cried. He just looked at me and said, May, you wait for me. You hear, you wait for me, and I'm going to come back and build you that house on the hill. I promised him I would wait. I promised him on my mama's Bible. I cut a piece of my hair and tied it with a ribbon and gave it to him to keep in his pocket, and he gave me his class ring wrapped in tape so it would fit my finger. I wore that ring every single day I slept with it. I bathed with it. I rubbed it with my thumb when I was scared, praying to a God I wasn't sure was listening, asking him to put a shield around that boy, asking him to bring him home in one piece. The day he left was gray and cold, the kind of cold that gets in your bones and stays there. The bus station was crowded with other boys and other girls crying and holding on like it was the end of the world, and it felt like the end of the world, Sugar. And Spearman gum, when he got on that Greyhound bus, and I watched it disappear down Highway 9 until it was just a speck of dust, and then I stood there for an hour just staring at the empty road, waiting for my heart to start beating again, but it felt like it went with him. That first year, I got a letter every week. That is where these papers come from. He wrote about the heat and the bugs and the rain that never stopped. He wrote about how much he missed my fried apple pies and how he closed his eyes at night and pretended he was back on the water tower, holding my hand. He never told me about the fighting. He tried to protect me. Even from halfway around the world, he would just say it was loud and scary. But he was okay. He was keeping his head down. He was counting the days until he could come back and make me Mrs. McCullough. But while he was gone, life here didn't stop. That is the cruel thing about the world, Sugar. It keeps spinning. Even when your world has stopped, my daddy got sick. Real sick. The coal dust from the mill finally caught up with his lungs, and he was coughing up blood, and Mama was working herself to the bone, trying to pay the doctors, and I had to step up. I had to get a job. I started waiting tables at the diner down on Main Street, pouring coffee for old men who tipped a quarter. If they were feeling generous, my feet ached and my back hurt, and I missed Jimmy so bad. It felt like a physical pain, like a bruise that wouldn't heal, and that is when your pawpaw came into the picture. Now, don't you go thinking I didn't love your grandfather. He was a saint. A quiet, sturdy oak of a man named Robert, but everyone just called him Bob or Bobby back then. He didn't go to the war because he had flat feet and his daddy needed him on the farm. He was the kind of man who showed up. He came into the diner every morning at 6 a.m. for eggs and bacon, and he never said much, just Mom and thank you, but he watched me running around ragged, and one day he just started helping. He fixed the leaky pipe under the sink at the diner without being asked. He brought firewood to my mama's house when Daddy was too weak to chop it. He didn't have Jimmy's fire. He didn't have that electric spark that made your knees weak, but he had something else. He had stability. He was solid ground in a world that felt like it was turning to quicksand. I liked Robert. He was safe. He was kind. He made Mama laugh, which was hard to do in those days. But my heart, my wild, crazy heart, belonged to the boy in the jungle. I was just passing time, waiting for the real life to start again, waiting for the bus to come back down Highway 9. But then the letters stopped. It was 1967, the summer of love. They called it on the TV with the hippies and the flowers in San Francisco. But around here it was just hot and dry, and the crops were burning up in the fields. 1 week went by, then 2, then a month. I went to the post office every single day asking Mr. Henderson if he checked the bag. Good, asking if maybe something got lost behind the counter. He would just look at me with those sad, pitying eyes and say, no, may nothing today, maybe tomorrow. The not knowing is the worst part. Sugar grief is a heavy door, but uncertainty is a hallway that never ends. You walk it every day hoping to see a light, but it is just shadows. I didn't sleep. I lost weight. I looked like a ghost haunting my own life. Mama told me to prepare for the worst. She said, May, honey, you got to be strong. You got to prepare your heart. But I refused. I said, no. He promised he would come back and build the house on the hill. And then the car came, not a bus, but a black sedan rolling up the gravel driveway, kicking up dust. I saw it from the kitchen window where I was peeling potatoes, and the peeler fell out of my hand and clattered into the sink. I knew before the 2 men in uniforms even stepped out. I knew before they walked up the porch steps with their hats in their hands. I screamed sugar. I screamed so loud. I think the birds flew out of the trees 3 counties over. Mama had to catch me before I hit the floor. They said he was a hero. They said he saved 3 men from his platoon. They gave his mama a flag and a medal, but a medal don't keep you warm at night, and a flag don't laugh at your jokes. They buried him on a rainy Tuesday in the churchyard down by the creek. The whole town came out because Jimmy was the golden boy, the one who was supposed to make it out. I stood there in my black dress, and I felt like I was being buried right along with him. I threw a handful of dirt on the box, and I said goodbye to the Paris, France, and the silk dress. And the house on the hill, I said goodbye to the girl I was because she died that day too. After the funeral, the silence set in. People bring casseroles and cakes for a week, and then they go back to their lives. They forget, but you don't forget. You wake up every morning, and for a split second you think everything is okay, and then the mountain falls on you all over again. I was 20 years old, and I felt like I was 100. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to eat. I just wanted to fade away. But Robert, your pawpaw, he didn't let me fade. He didn't push. He didn't try to take Jimmy's place. He just came over and sat on the porch with Daddy. He mowed the grass. He fixed the roof. He brought groceries and left them on the table. He was just there like a rock in the middle of a raging river. One day, about 6 months later, he found me sitting by the creek crying my eyes out, and he sat down next to me, didn't try to hug me, just sat there and said, May, no, I ain't him. I know I can't never be him, but I am here, and I ain't going nowhere, and if you need to lean, you lean on me. It wasn't a romance like in the movie Sugar. It was a rescue. I was drowning, and he was the raft. I didn't marry him because I had butterflies in my stomach. I married him because I was tired of swimming alone. I married him 2 years later in the small chapel, not the big church. And I wore a simple suit, not a white gown, because I didn't feel like a bride. I felt like a survivor. But here is the secret. Here is the thing. I never told a soul. The night before I married your grandfather, I went to Jimmy's mama's house. She gave me this box. She said, May sent this home with his effects. It has your name on it. I opened it up, and there was this stack of letters he wrote, but never mailed letters. He kept in his pack, waiting for a clear day to send them. And the very last one, the one on top, dated 2 days before he died, it said, May, don't you wait forever. If I don't make it back, you find someone who treats you like a queen. You find someone steady. You live a good life for both of us. I read that letter, and I cried until I was dry, and then I made a choice. I put the letters in this cracker tin, and I shoved it deep under the floorboards of my closet. I made a choice to be Robert's wife, to be a good mother, to be present in the life. I had not the life I lost. I locked Jimmy away in the dark because if I looked at him, if I read those words, I knew I couldn't go through with the wedding. I knew I would spend my whole life looking backward instead of forward. So I married Pawpaw, and I smiled in the pictures, and I learned to cook his favorite meatloaf, and I washed his work clothes, and I bore his children, your daddy and your aunt Sarah, and I loved them with everything I had. But there was always a part of me, a tiny secret corner of my heart, that was still sitting on that water tower holding Jimmy's hand, waiting for a jet plane that never came. It feels good to say it out loud, Lord. It feels like setting down a sack of concrete. I carried that guilt for years, sugar, thinking I was living a lie, thinking I was cheating on your grandfather by loving a ghost. But as the years went on, as the hair turned gray and the kids grew up and left, I started to learn something about love. I started to learn that you can love two people at the same time in two different ways. You can love the fire and you can love the hearth. You can love the dream and you can love the reality. And reality was about to get a whole lot harder, folks. Think the tragedy ends when the funeral is over, but the real tragedy is the slow grind of the years that come after we had some hard times coming, sugar. The kind of times that test what you're really made of. The 70s and 80s weren't kind to small towns like this. The mills started laying people off the farm, started getting auctioned on the courthouse steps, and we were right in the middle of it, trying to hold on to a life that was slipping through our fingers like dry sand. I remember the recession hitting us like a punch in the gut. Papa lost his shift at the plant. They cut him down to part-time and then let him go entirely. He was a proud man, your grandfather. He defined himself by his work, and when that work was gone, he looked like a ship without a rudder. He would sit at the kitchen table staring at the classified ads, circling things with a red pen. His shoulders slumped, and I would look at him and I would think about Jimmy. I would think about how Jimmy was going to be a pilot, how we would have been rich and traveling the world, and I felt a bitterness rising up in my throat like bile. I am ashamed to say it now, but I looked at my husband, the man who saved me, and I resented him. I resented the struggle. I resented the patches on the kids' jeans. I resented the fact that we were eating beans again, just like when I was a little girl, that box in the attic. Started calling to me. I would sneak up there when Pawpaw was out looking for work, and I would open it and read the letters. I would escape into the past. I would daydream about a life where I wasn't worrying about the electric bill, where I wasn't tired all the time. It was my escape, but it was dangerous, sugar, because you can't live in the past. The past is a ghost, and ghosts don't pay the mortgage. We almost lost the house in '82. Interest rates were sky high, and the bank was calling every other day. Pawpaw was working 3 jobs. He was pumping gas at the station on the highway. He was mowing lawns, and he was fixing cars in our driveway under the shade tree. He would come in at 10 o'clock at night, covered in grease and smelling like exhaust, too tired to even eat. And I was working double shifts at the diner, my feet swollen 2 sizes too big. We were passing each other like strangers in the hallway. 2 people pulling a wagon with square wheels, just trying to keep moving forward. It all came to a head on a Tuesday in November rain, slapping against the windows like it was trying to break in. I came down to the kitchen about 2 in the morning, couldn't sleep, worrying about the banknote, and I saw him there, Pawpaw, sitting at the little Formica table with his head in his hands and his shoulders shaking. Lord have mercy. I had never seen that man cry, not when his daddy died, not when he cut his hand open on the thresher and needed 20 stitches. But there he was sobbing quiet, like trying not to wake the house up, just heaving with a grief I couldn't touch. I stood in the doorway watching him, and my heart broke right down the middle. Not for Jimmy, not for the life I could have had, but for him, for this man who was killing himself trying to keep a roof over my head. He looked up and saw me, and he wiped his face with his grease-stained sleeve and said, "May, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I failed you. I can't make it work. I can't give you what you deserve." And hearing him say that, hearing him apologize for working himself to death, it did something to me. It snapped that bitterness right out of my soul like a dry twig. I went over to him, and I took those rough, scarred hands in mine, hands that had calluses on top of calluses, hands that were permanently stained with oil and dirt, and I kissed them. I kissed every scar and every knuckle, and I realized right then and there that I had been a fool, sugar, a pure fool. I had been in love with a memory, with a ghost in a uniform who never had to pay a bill or fix a furnace or walk the floor with a colicky baby. But this man, this flesh and blood man in front of me, he was the real thing. He was the hero, not because he carried a gun, but because he carried the weight of our world and didn't ask for no medals. I told him, "Hush, Robert McCullough, you hush your mouth right now. We got beans and we got a roof and we got each other." And that is enough. That is more than enough. We sat there till the sun came up, drinking coffee and making a plan, and we made it through. We scraped and we saved and we didn't lose the house. It wasn't easy, honey. Nothing worth having ever is. But we did it together, side by side. Pulling that wagon through the mud, years went by. and the hair turned white, and the grandkids started coming along. That is you and your cousins, and life got softer. The house was paid off, and we could finally breathe a little, but that box was still up in the attic, waiting like a time bomb ticking away. I didn't go up there anymore. I didn't need to read the letters because I made my peace. I chose my life, but I never threw them away. I guess I was still sentimental, still holding on to a little piece of my history. Then about 10 years ago, we had that big storm. You remember the one knocked the power out for 3 days? Well, the roof started leaking right over the guest bedroom and Pawpaw. Got the ladder out. He was 74 years old and too stubborn to hire a handyman. Said he could fix it himself. He went up into the attic with a flashlight and a bucket of tar, and I was downstairs holding the ladder praying he wouldn't fall. And then I heard it. I heard the loose floorboard creak over in the corner where I hid the tin, and then silence, just a long, heavy silence. My heart stopped beating. I just knew he found it. I knew he opened it and saw the letters tied in twine. I knew he saw the picture of Jimmy. I kept in there, the one of us on the water tower. I stood at the bottom of the ladder shaking like a leaf, waiting for him to come down, waiting for the yelling, waiting for him to ask me why I kept love letters from another man for 50 years, waiting for him to look at me with hate in his eyes. I heard his boots coming back across the ceiling. I heard him climbing down the ladder, step by heavy step. I held my breath. I prepared my defense. I was going to tell him it meant nothing. I was going to beg for forgiveness. He got to the bottom and he turned around and looked at me. His face was smudged with dust and sweat, and he looked old sugar. He looked so old and tired. He looked at me for a long time, just studying my face like he was trying to memorize it, and then he reached out and brushed a piece of lint off my shoulder. He said, "Roof is fixed. May shouldn't leak no more." And he folded up the ladder and put it back in the garage. He never said a word about the box. He never asked who Jimmy was. He never asked why I kept it. He just went back to his chair and turned on the wheel of fortune like it was any other Tuesday. And that silence, that beautiful, terrible silence, was the loudest "I love you" I ever heard in my life. Don't you see, honey? He knew he had to know. He probably knew for years. Maybe he found it a long time ago and never said nothing. He knew I had a past. He knew I had a broken heart before I met him, and he was big enough and strong enough to let me keep it. He didn't need to own every part of me to love me. He respected my grief. He respected my memories, and he knew that at the end of the day, I was the one making his coffee. I was the one sleeping in his bed. I was the one holding his hand. He knew he won. He didn't need to fight a ghost. When he passed away last winter, when the cancer finally took him, I sat by his bed in the hospice holding that same hand I kissed in the kitchen all those years ago, and I asked him, I had to know, I whispered, "Robert, did you know about the box?" And he squeezed my fingers weak as a kitten, and he smiled just a little bit and whispered, "May, honey, everyone needs a place to put the things they can't carry. Everyone needs a box. I love you, May. I love you." And then he was gone. So here I am, an old woman in an empty house with the rain falling down and this rusty old tin in my lap, looking at you with tears in your eyes. You ask me why I'm telling you this. Why now? Well, sugar, I see how you young folks live. I see you on your phone, swiping left and right, looking for the perfect person, looking for the fireworks and the movie moments. You throw people away if they have a flaw, or if things get hard. You think love is a feeling that is supposed to make you happy every single minute of the day. But love ain't a fairy tale, honey. Love is the water bill. Love is the burnt toast. Love is the silence when you don't need to fill the air. Love is forgiving the parts of each other that are broken. Love is staying when every bone in your body wants to run away. I loved Jimmy with a fire that burned hot and fast, and it was beautiful, but it was a dream. I loved your pawpaw with a love that was like the earth, deep and solid and real, and that is the love that sustains you. That is the love that grows corn in the field. I want you to take this box. No, don't open it. I don't need to read them again. I know what they say. I want you to take it out back to the burn barrel when the rain stops. I want you to burn it for me. I don't need the ghost of Jimmy McCullough haunting this attic no more. I got my Robert. I got my memories of the man who stayed. I am ready to let go. I am ready to be whole. Listen to me good now. Before you go, put down that phone. I know you're recording this or texting or whatever you do. Put it down and look at me. Life is short, sugar. It is faster than a blink of an eye. 1 minute you are 16 on a water tower, and the next you are 84 sitting on a porch watching the rain. Don't you waste it looking for something better. Don't you waste it chasing ghosts. You find the one who looks at you like you are the sun. In the moon, you find the one who will fix the roof in the rain, and you hold on to them, you hold on tight, and you never let go. And do me a favor, if this story meant anything to you, if my old ramblings touched something in that chest of yours, you go home and you hug your person, You hug them till they squirm, and you tell them you love them warts and all, and maybe you share this story with someone else who needs to hear it, 'cause Lord knows we could all use a little more truth in this world filled with plastic. All right? Now that's enough of my yapping. These old bones are getting cold, and I think I smell the coffee pot done, brewing. You help me up, child. My knees ain't what they used to be. Thank you for listening to an old woman's secrets. Now go on, get out of here before the roads flood. Go on, live your life, and don't you ever forget the box in the attic. Ain't as important as the people in the living room. Go on now. Get bless you, sugar bless you. Wait a minute, sit your tail back down. I ain't done with you yet. The rain is picking up again. Listen to that thunder rolling in from the west. Sounds like furniture moving in heaven, don't it? You can't go driving in that mess. You will hydroplane right off the bridge, and then I will be the one explaining to your mama why you got dinged up. So you just pour yourself another cup of coffee and settle in, 'cause staring at that box has got memories floating up like silt in a stirred up creek. And there's a few more things you need to know before you go turning my history into ash. You look at that picture of Jimmy again. Yeah. The one on the water tower, we looked like movie stars, didn't we? Young and stupid and shiny. But let me tell you something about that shininess. It don't last sugar, chrome rusts, and silk rots, but iron just gets stronger. The more you beat on it, and that is what my life with your pawpaw was. It was iron. I want to tell you about the years in the middle, the years you grandkids don't think about, because you think we were always just old folks sitting in recliners. You see the wrinkles, but you don't see how we earned them. I told you about the hard times in the 80s, but you don't really understand what that felt like unless you were there. It wasn't just about money. It was about pride when the factory finally shut the doors for good in 85. It was like a funeral for the whole town. Men who had worked that line for 30 years, men who defined themselves by the calluses on their hands. They were walking around like ghosts. Your pawpaw was one of them. I remember he came home with his pink slip folded up in his pocket, so small, you would think he was trying to hide it from God himself. He didn't say a word. He just went out to the shed and started sharpening the lawnmower blade over and over again. Shh, shh, looking for something he could control in a world that had spun out of his hands. That was the year I learned what a marriage really is. See, when I was dreaming about Jimmy, I was dreaming about picnics and dancing, but marriage to Robert meant figuring out how to stretch a pound of ground beef into 3 nights of dinner. It meant canning 300 jars of green beans from the garden until my fingers were raw and stained green because we couldn't afford to buy vegetables at the Kroger. It meant sewing patches on the knees of your daddy's jeans, not because it was stylish, but because he didn't have another pair. And let me tell you about your daddy back then. He was a wild one, just like me, full of vinegar and rebellion. He wanted a car, he wanted brand name sneakers, he wanted out of this town just like I did once. And Robert and me, we had to be the wall he pushed against. There was a night your daddy came home smelling like cheap beer and trouble, screaming that he hated us, that we were nobodies, that we were losers living in a loser town. I saw Robert flinch like he had been slapped, but he didn't yell back. That is the thing about your grandfather. He didn't fight fire with fire. He fought it with water. He just looked at your daddy and said, son, you can hate me all you want, but I am going to love you enough to keep you from ruining your life. And he sat up all night in the living room just waiting to make sure your daddy didn't sneak back out. That is the kind of love that don't make it into the songs on the radio, sugar. It ain't romantic. It is exhausted. It is boring. It is stubborn, but it is the only thing that keeps a family from falling off the cliff. I think about that box in the attic during those years. Sometimes when the fighting was loud or the bills were piled up high, I would think about escaping. I would think, what if I had gone to Paris? What if I was wearing that silk dress, drinking wine? Instead of scrubbing grease out of work shirts, but then I would look out the window and see Robert in the backyard playing catch with your daddy, trying to teach him how to throw a curveball even though his back was killing him from bending over cars all day, and the shame would wash over me because Jimmy, bless his sweet soul, Jimmy was a dream, and dreams are perfect because they never have to wake up and pay the electric bill. Jimmy never had to deal with a rebellious teenager. He never had to worry about a prostate exam or a leaky roof. He got to stay young and perfect forever, frozen in time like a bug in amber. But Robert had to do the heavy lifting of living, and I realized that the man sweating in the backyard was worth 10 of the boy in the photograph, and we had good times too. Don't you go thinking it was all misery. We had Saturday nights where we would push the furniture back and put on Patsy Cline and dance in the living room. Until we were breathless, we had church potlucks where we laughed until our sides hurt. We had the pride of seeing your daddy graduate and go off to college, the first one in our family to do it. And I remember sitting at that graduation, squeezing Robert's hand, thinking we did this, us two, nobodies with our beans and our patches. We built a foundation strong enough to launch a rocket. You know, folks today talk about America like it is broken, like it is over, but they didn't see this town in the tough years. They didn't see Mrs. Gable down the street bringing over a casserole when she knew we were low on food, even though she didn't have much herself. They didn't see the way the men would gather at the hardware store, not to complain, but to trade tips on where to find work or how to fix a carburetor. They didn't see the grit sugar. Resilience ain't about bouncing back like a rubber ball. It is about being like an old oak tree. The storm blows and you lose some leaves. Maybe you lose a branch or two. You might even crack down the middle, but your roots go deep. They hold on to the rock, and when the sun comes out again, you are still standing. You might look a little different. You might be scarred, but you are still standing. That is what I want you to take from this tin box. Not just the sadness of a lost love, but the triumph of the life I chose. I want you to look at me and see that you can survive a broken heart. You can survive a war. You can survive a recession, and you can come out the other side with a smile on your face and a story to tell. And speaking of stories, there is one last thing I never told. Nobody, not even Robert, and this is the part that haunts me a little bit. Sometimes late at night, about 5 years after the war, I went to the memorial wall in Washington, D.C. Robert took me. He drove the whole way in our old beat-up station wagon just so I could see it. We walked along that black granite wall, touching the names, seeing the reflections of our own faces mixed in with the names of the dead, and I found him. I found James Michael McCullough carved into the stone. I stood there, and I traced his name with my finger, and I waited to feel that old crushing grief. I waited to fall apart, but you know what? Sugar, I didn't. I felt sad, sure, but mostly I felt peace. I looked at my reflection in the black stone, and I saw Robert standing behind me a few feet back, giving me space, holding my purse, watching out for me, and I realized that while Jimmy's name was on the wall, Robert's name was written on my heart. I turned around and walked back to my husband, and I took his arm, and I said, "Let's go home, Robert. I'm ready to go home," and we never looked back. That was the day I really buried Jimmy. That was the day. I really became Robert's wife in every way that matters, not just on paper, but in my soul. So when you go to burn these letters, I want you to watch the smoke go up, and I want you to think of it as a prayer of thanks for the ones who didn't come home, and a prayer of thanks for the ones who did. And maybe, just maybe, a prayer for yourself that you find the strength to choose the real thing over the perfect thing. The rain is stopping now. Look at that. The sun is trying to peek through the clouds over the barn. God is painting a picture for us, sugar. Look at that light hitting the wet grass, turning everything into diamonds. That is what life is. It is the light hitting the mess and making it beautiful. All right? Now I'm in. This time you take that box and you get going. I got shows to watch, and I got a nap to take, and you got a life to live. Don't you dare feel sorry for me. I had a big life, a full life. I loved 2 good men, and I raised a good family, and I'm sitting on my own porch in a house that is paid for. I am the richest woman in the world. Give me a kiss on the cheek. Yeah, right there. You smell like outside. You smell like the future. Go on. Now take the box, drive safe, and call your mama. She worries about you, and hey, thanks for listening to an old lady ramble. It gets quiet around here sometimes, and it was good to let the ghosts out for a little walk. Go on now, get before I change my mind and make you wash the windows. Bye-bye, sugar. Love you. You ain't gone yet? Good, because I was sitting here watching you fumble with your keys, and I got to thinking there is a hole in that story. I told you a hole big enough to drive a tractor through, and knowing you, you will go home and try to fill it in with your own imagination and get it all wrong. Sit back down for a minute. The rain is coming down sideways now. Anyway, you can't drive in that mess unless you got a death wish I told you about. The box, and I told you about Jimmy, and I told you about Pawpaw, but I didn't tell you about the silence, not the good silence of a happy marriage, but the heavy silence that fell over this whole country for a while. There, the silence that almost broke us all. And since you are living in a town that feels mighty loud and mighty scary, I reckon you need to hear about how we got through the quiet years. You look at this farmhouse and you see vintage or rustic or whatever fancy word they use on those television shows now, but you don't see the patches on the walls. I want you to look right there above the door frame. You see that mismatched paint? Yeah, that slightly lighter shade of cream. Well, that is where the bank notice was taped up in 1983. We don't talk about it much, folks. From my generation, we like to pretend we pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps and never looked back. But honey, there came a time when we didn't have no boots left to pull on. It wasn't just us, it was the Millers down the road and the Washingtons over on the ridge, and the whole town felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for a shoe to drop. I want to tell you about the Christmas of '83 course. That was the year I learned what America really was. You see, on the news, they talk about this country like it is just lines on a map or politicians arguing in suits. But America ain't that. America is what happens in the kitchen when there ain't enough food to go around that year. Pawpaw had been out of work for 6 months. The unemployment checks were shrinking, and the prices at the pump were climbing, and I had sold my grandmother's silver tea set just to pay the property tax. I didn't tell Robert that he thought I lost it moving boxes, but I pawned it at a shop 3 towns over, so he wouldn't see it in the window. Shame is a powerful thing, sugar. It makes you keep secrets. That ain't got nothing to do with love affairs. We had told your daddy and your Aunt Sarah that Christmas was going to be lean that year. That is the word we use, lean, like it was a choice, like we were going on a diet, but the truth was Christmas was going to be non-existent. I had knitted some scarves, and Robert had carved some wooden toys out of scrap lumber, but there was no bikes, no Atari video games, no turkeys on the table. We were going to eat ham hocks and beans and be grateful we had heat. 2 days before Christmas Eve, the furnace died, just gave up the ghost, stopped rattling, and went silent. The house got cold fast. And I mean the kind of cold that hurts your teeth. We didn't have the money for a repairman, and Robert didn't have the parts to fix it. We huddled in the living room under every blanket we owned, trying to make a game of it for the kids camping out. We called it, but I could see the fear in Robert's eyes. He felt like he had failed his primary job as a man, which was to keep his family warm. I went into the kitchen to make tea on the gas stove just to warm my hands, and I stood there looking out the window at the snow coming down, and I broke sugar. I really broke. I put my head on the cold glass, and I asked God why. I asked him why we worked so hard and loved so good and still ended up freezing in the dark. I felt that old pull to the box in the attic, thinking about how Jimmy would have had a furnace that worked, thinking about how easy life was supposed to be. And then I saw lights coming up the driveway, not one set of headlights, but 2, then 3, then 4, a whole convoy of trucks and beat-up sedans rolling through the snow. I thought it was the bank or the sheriff coming to tell us to get out, but it was the neighbors. It was old man Miller with a propane heater from his barn. It was Mrs. Washington with a pot of soup big enough to bathe in. It was the preacher with a toolbox and 3 other men from the plant who didn't have jobs either, but they had hands, and they had know how they didn't knock. They just walked in stomping snow off their boots, filling up my quiet, cold house with noise. And laughter and the smell of tobacco and chili. They didn't say, oh, you poor things. They didn't offer charity because charity feels like a handout. They just said, heard y'all were having trouble with the pilot light, thought we'd take a look. Giving Robert his dignity, giving him a way to accept help without feeling small. That is what community is, honey. It isn't posting a heart on a screen. It is showing up with a wrench and a heater when the world gets cold. They fixed that furnace. In an hour, jury rigged it with wire and hoping spare parts. But it roared back to life. And let me tell you, that heat felt like the breath of God himself. Mrs. Washington set that soup on the stove, and we all ate out of bowls standing up in the kitchen. Black folks and white folks, Methodists and Baptist folks who had nothing sharing a little bit. They had that night. I looked around my kitchen at all those tired, worn-out faces laughing and telling stories about the war or the plant or the football team, and I realized that the box in the attic, the letters from Jimmy, they were a fantasy of a perfect life. But this right here, this crowded, messy, loud kitchen, this was a good life. It changed me that night. It made me realize that resilience ain't a solo sport. You can't carry the world by yourself, and you ain't supposed to. We are woven together, sugar like a quilt. And if one square tears, the others have to hold the tension. That is what made this country work. Not the laws or the gold in Fort Knox, but the way we held each other up when the ground shook. And I worry about you young ones, I do. I see you isolated in your little apartments, staring at your screens, terrified of the future, thinking you have to solve climate change and the economy and everything else all by your lonesome. You carry the weight of the world in your pocket, but you don't know your neighbor's name. You are connected to everyone but you belong to no one. That is why I'm telling you this story about the box and the letters and the furnace. Not just to clear my conscience, but to give you a roadmap. You see, secrets like that box, they isolate you. They build a wall between you and the people who love you for 60 years. I kept a part of myself locked away because I was scared that if I showed it, I would be rejected. I was scared that if Pawpaw knew I loved another man, he wouldn't love me no more, but he knew and he loved me anyway. Just like the neighbors knew we were broke and they came anyway. The lesson took me a lifetime to learn, but I'm giving it to you for free right now. You don't have to be perfect to be loved, and you don't have to be strong to be safe. You just have to be real. You take those letters, and when you burn them, watch the smoke rise up and imagine it is all the fear you have been carrying. Imagine it is the need to be perfect, the need to have it all figured out. Let it go. Let it turn into ash and blow away across the cornfield, because what is left after the fire is the truth. And the truth is, you come from a long line of survivors. You got my blood in your veins, and that means you got iron in your spine. You come from people who survived the depression, the wars, the heartbreak, and the silence, and we didn't do it by being special. We did it by holding on. I want you to promise me something, not a big promise, just a little one. Next time you feel like the walls are closing in, next time you feel like you are failing because your life doesn't look like the pictures on the internet, I want you to remember that Christmas in '83. I want you to remember that the warmest fire is the one you build together. And one more thing about Pawpaw, since I'm spilling all the beans today, you know, he never liked to dance, said he had 2 left feet and no rhythm. But that night after the furnace was fixed and the neighbors had gone home, the house was warm and the kids were asleep, he came up behind me while I was washing the soup bowls, and he wrapped his arms around my waist and he started to sway just a little bit. No music, just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of the wind outside. He put his chin on my shoulder and he whispered, "We are rich, May, we are filthy rich." And he was right. We didn't have a dime in the bank, but we were rich in the things that fire can't burn and rust can't touch. I think about that moment more than I think about the water tower. Now, the water tower was the thrill, but the kitchen was the peace. You look for the peace. Sugar, the thrill burns out, but the peace keeps you warm. Now the rain has really stopped. I can see the sun breaking through for real this time, hitting the puddles, making them look like gold coins scattered on the ground. You get on out of here, you got a drive ahead of you, and I got a soaps opera starting in 10 minutes, and I hate to miss the beginning, because that is when they tell you who slept with who. Take the box. Hold it with both hands, feel the weight of it one last time, and then let it go. You are the generation that gets to put the burden down. You hear me? We carried it, so you wouldn't have to. So don't you dare go picking up heavy things you don't need to carry. You walk light, sugar. You walk light. And if you see your daddy, you tell him I said to call me. He hasn't called in 3 days, and I need to tell him how to make that brisket for the reunion, or he is going to dry it out like he did last year. Lord, that boy tries, but he cooks like a Yankee. Go on. Now, I mean, if you get off my porch before I put you to work snapping beans, love you, honey, drive safe, and watch out for the deer on Highway 9. They are jumping this time of year. Bye-bye now. Hey, you stop that car. Don't you turn that key yet. I see you sitting there with your head against the steering wheel crying. I got eyes like a hawk. Even if my knees are bad, turn it off and come back up here on this porch right now. We ain't finishing this with you in tears and me watching from the window. Wipe your face and bring yourself back up those steps. I forgot to give you something anyway. Yeah, sit back down. I know it's a lot. It's heavy, getting a whole lifetime dumped in your lap on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. But I saw you walking away carrying that box like it was made of lead. And I realized I didn't tell you the most important part. I told you about the tragedy, and I told you about the struggle, but I didn't tell you about the joy. And if you walk away thinking my life was just a long, sad country song, then I failed you. I want you to look at this garden out here. I know it looks dead right now, just brown stalks and mud, but you come back here in July, and it will be a riot of color, tomatoes, big as softballs, zinnias taller than you, yellow squash hiding under leaves the size of dinner plates. I planted this garden every single year for 50 years, even the year Jimmy died, even the year we almost lost the house, even the year Paw got sick. Why do you think I did that? Was it because I was hungry? Well, some years, yes. But mostly it was because I needed to put my hands in the dirt. I needed to remind myself that things grow back. That is the lesson, sugar. The frost comes and it kills everything above ground. It turns the world gray and bitter, but down deep under the soil, the roots are just sleeping. They are waiting, and that is what you're doing right now. You're just waiting for your summer. I see you young people, and my heart aches for you truly. It does. You fight a different kind of war than we did. We had the Germans and the Viet Cong and the poverty. We had enemies. We could see enemies. We could hit with a stick or shoot at. But you got enemies that live inside your own head. You got this invisible pressure to be perfect, to be famous, to be rich by the time you're 25. And if you ain't, then you think you are trash. I watch the news. I see the anxiety. I see the depression. sweeping through your generation like a fever, and I think it is, because you forgot how to be ordinary. You forgot that it is okay to just be a person who lives in a house and loves their family and tends their garden. You think you got to change the world, but honey, you change the world by being good to the people standing right next to you. Let me tell you about the happiest day of my life. It wasn't when I got married, and it wasn't when the war ended, and it wasn't when the war ended, and it wasn't even when we paid off the mortgage. It was a Tuesday in 1992. Nothing special about it, just a Tuesday. Your pawpaw had retired and was sitting in that rocker right there, whittling a bird out of cedar wood, and I was shelling peas into a metal bowl. And the grandkids, that's you and your cousins, were running through the sprinkler in the front yard, screaming and laughing, getting muddy. The sun was going down, turning the sky that bruised purple color, and the fireflies were just starting to blink in the tall grass. And I looked at Robert, and he looked at me, and we didn't say a word. We just listened to the sound of you kids laughing, and the sound of the crickets, and the smell of cut grass. And in that moment, I felt a peace so deep it scared me. I realized that this was it. This was the whole point, not the trips to Paris I never took, not the silk dresses I never wore, but this moment of absolute quiet satisfaction. That is what I want for you. I want you to find your Tuesday afternoon. I want you to stop chasing the big loud moments and start looking for the quiet ones, because the big moments are just fireworks. They explode and then it is dark again. But the quiet moments are like a heart fire. They keep you warm all night long. And about that box you are holding, I told you to burn it, and I meant it. But before you do, I want you to take one thing out. Look in the bottom corner underneath the letters. There is a little velvet pouch. Yeah. That blue one, go ahead, open it. That is a compass. It was Jimmy's. He gave it to me before he got on that bus. Said he wanted me to always know where true north was. Said he wanted me to find my way back to him. Well, I never found my way back to him, but that compass sat in that box for 60 years pointing north in the dark, while I lived my life pointing north, while I raised my babies pointing north, while I buried my husband. I want you to keep the compass burned. The letters burn the past, but keep the compass. Let it remind you that no matter how lost you get, no matter how dark the woods are, there is always a true north. There's always a way home, and home ain't a place, sugar. Home is a state of mind. It is the place where you are accepted. It is the place where you don't have to pretend. You put that in your pocket. You let it guide you not back to the past, but forward into your own future. You're going to meet someone one day, maybe. You already met them. Maybe they are waiting for you at the coffee shop or the library, and they ain't going to be perfect. They might have a crooked nose or a loud laugh, or they might not know how to dress right. But if they look at you and you feel safe, if they hold your hand and the noise in your head gets quiet, then you hold on. And don't you keep secrets from them. You hear me? Don't you have a box in the attic? You tell them everything. You tell them about your scars. You tell them about your fears. You let them see the messy parts. Because if they run away, then they weren't the one. But if they stay, if they pull up a chair and say, tell me more, then you got yourself a keeper. You got yourself a Robert. I am tired now, sugar. The talking has worn me out, and the memories are starting to feel heavy again. It is good to visit the past, but you can't live there. The past is a nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to sleep on the floor. I am ready to go. Back to my quiet house and my soaps and my memories of the man who stayed. You take that compass and you get in that car and you drive careful. And when you get to the bridge, you stop and you throw those ashes in the river. Let the water carry Jimmy down to the ocean. Let him finally go to Paris. Let him see the world he never got to see. You set him free, and in doing that, you set yourself free too. And listen, if you ever feel like the world is too much, if you ever feel like that invisible war is winning, you come back to this porch. The door is always unlocked, and the coffee pot is always on. And I got plenty of stories left. I got stories about your daddy. That would make his hair curl, stories about the time the cow got into the church, stories about the time we made moonshine in the bathtub. Oh, yes. Your grandma has a few more surprises up her sleeve, but for now, you go, you live, you love, and you be brave. Not the kind of brave that jumps out of airplanes, but the kind of brave that gets up in the morning when you want to. Stay in bed, the kind of brave that says I love you first, the kind of brave that forgives. And do me one last favor. If you see anyone out there looking lost, anyone looking like they're carrying a leaky bucket, you share a little bit of this light with them. You tell them old grandma said it's going to be all right. You tell them the sun always comes up even after the longest, darkest night. You tell them to keep walking. Now go on, give me a hug, a real one, squeeze tight. There you go. You feel that is love. That is the only thing that matters. Now get out of here before I start crying again. And I hate crying, makes my nose red. Go on, fly away. Little bird, the sky is yours. Is they gone? Yeah, I reckon they are just a cloud of dust settling back down on the gravel road. Lord, that child drives too fast, always in a rush to get somewhere else, never realizing that right here is a perfectly good place to be, but you You're still here, ain't you? I can feel you watching me through that little glass window you're holding in your hand, or that big screen sitting on your desk. You've been sitting here on the porch with me this whole time listening to an old woman ramble about love and war and cracker tins. And I appreciate that, I really do. It gets quiet out here, the kind of quiet that rings in your ears. You look around this porch and you see that empty rocking chair right there next to mine. That was Robert's chair. He sat there every evening for 40 years whittling his wood or just watching the corn grow. He didn't say much, but his presence was loud, his silence was a comfort, and now that he is gone, the silence is just silence. And sometimes it gets so heavy I feel like I'm wading through molasses. That is why I told the story today, Sugar, not just to unburden my own soul, but because I know you got an empty chair in your life too. Maybe it is a person who died. Maybe it is a person who left. Maybe it is the person you used to be before life got hard. We all got empty chairs, and we all got boxes in the attic, and we all got ghosts walking around in our hallways. I want to talk to you for a minute, just you and me, about this country of ours, about this place we call home. Now, I know things look bad on the news, everyone yelling and fighting and drawing lines in the sand. Folks forgot how to be neighbors. They only know how to be enemies. But let me tell you something. I have seen this movie before. I saw it in 1942 when the world was on fire. I saw it in 68 when the cities were burning. I saw it in the Depression when men were starving in the streets. And every single time we thought it was the end. We thought the sun wasn't going to come up tomorrow, but it did. The sun always comes up. America ain't the politicians in Washington, Sugar. America is the woman down the street who watches your kids. When you have to work late, America is the man who stops to help you change a flat tire in the rain. America is the potluck dinner where nobody asks who you voted for. They just ask if you want potato salad or coleslaw. That is the real country, the one that lives on the front porch, not on the Twitter machine. And we are losing that. We are losing the front porch. We are trading it for digital walls and echo chambers where we only hear what we want to hear. But you can fix that. Yes, you're sitting right there, you can fix it. It starts with sharing a story. It starts with being vulnerable. It starts with saying, hey, I'm hurting too. Hey, I'm scared too. You know, back in the day when we had news, we didn't just click a button. We walked over to the fence and we talked to our neighbor. We shared the burden, and that made it lighter. Well, you got a new kind of fence. Now you got that share button on your screen, and I want to ask you to use it, not to make me famous. Lord knows I don't need that. I will be dead and gone soon enough, but I want you to use it to connect. If this story about Jimmy and Robert and the box in the attic made you feel something, if it made you think about your own secret grief or your own quiet love, then you send it to someone. Don't just keep it to yourself. You send it to your mama. You send it to your best friend. You send it to that person you haven't talked to in 5 years because you were too stubborn to apologize. You use this story as a bridge. Sugar, tell them, hey, I heard this old lady talking, and it made me think of you. Tell them, hey, I miss you. Tell them, hey, let's meet on the porch and drink some coffee and actually talk, not text, not email, but talk. Let's look each other in the eye and remember that we are human beings, because at the end of the day, when you're 84 years old and your knees don't work and your hands are shaking, you ain't gonna care about how many likes you got on a picture. You ain't gonna care about how much money is in the bank. You're gonna care about the hands you held. You're gonna care about the tears you dried and the laughs that made your belly hurt. You're gonna remember the smell of the rain on a tin roof and the sound of a screen door slamming and the taste of home-grown tomatoes. And you are gonna remember the love, the messy, complicated, hard, beautiful love that makes the whole struggle worth it. So go on now. Do it. Send this out into the world. Let it be a ripple in the pond. Maybe it will reach someone who is sitting in the dark right now thinking they are all alone. Maybe it will remind them that the sun is coming. Maybe it will save a life. You never know, Sugar. You never know the power of a simple story told from the heart. The sun is going down. Now look at that sky turning pink and orange like a peach getting ripe. God is putting on a show for us one last time today. I think I'm going to go inside and warm up some soup. I think I'm going to sit in my chair and turn on the radio and listen to the old songs. And I'm going to imagine Robert is sitting right there next to me, whittling his bird, and Jimmy is flying his jet plane high above the clouds, and we are all together in the great big living room of the sky. Thank you for visiting me. Thank you for sitting a spell. Thank you for letting an old woman feel heard. It means more than you know now. You go out there and you live a good life. You hear me? You live a life so full that when you get to be my age, you don't have no boxes in the attic because you used it all up. You spent every bit of love you had. You be good to each other. And remember, the storm always runs out of rain. Eventually, good night, Sugar, and God bless you.